Okay, so we have several different, now we're going to talk about organ systems. Okay, so there's a cool thing in your book on page 78 about a face transplant. So you could read about that. That's cool. So page 79 is where organ systems start. So an organ has two or more types of tissue, and the types of tissue are going to work together to carry out a function. An organ system is more than one kind of organ that's going to work together to carry out a function. Okay, so organ systems of our human body. So first one that I have is skeletal system. Okay, so skeletal system is made up of your bone. So the bone is going to support the body. Okay, it's going to help move the body. It actually stores calcium, and it's going to be important for producing red blood cells. Okay, we're going to go over each one of these in depth when we come to them. They each get a chapter in the book. Okay, the muscular system. Okay, that's how we move, how we stay upright. It also is going to be important in regulating our body temperature and keeping us warm. Okay, the nervous system. Okay, that's where we get sensory information. It's how we interpret the sensory information, how we move. The nervous system kind of controls everything. Okay, endocrine system is it's your glands, so like your thyroid gland, adrenal glands, pituitary glands, sex glands. Okay, endocrine system and the nervous system are really two control systems that regulate everything that's going on in your body. Okay, so there's a lot going on with those. Okay, and then reproductive system, we know what that does. Okay. Okay, now this is just about body membranes. Okay, so the different body cavities and the membranes of the body. Okay, so if you look at the body cavities, okay, we are going to see the ventral cavity. Okay, so the ventral cavity is what's on the front. So ventral means front. And then we have dorsal cavity, and the dorsal cavity is the back. The dorsal cavity is made up of the cranial cavity, which has your brain, and the vertebral cavity, which contains your spinal cord and your vertebrae. Okay, the ventral cavity has the thoracic cavity, which is above your diaphragm. Okay, so that's where your lungs and your heart are. Okay, and then the abdominal cavity has most of your digestive organs. Okay, and then the pelvic cavity is down in your pelvis. Okay, and that's reproductive organs. Okay, now if we look at this picture at the bottom here, this talks about the membranes. Okay, so the membranes that line your thoracic cavity are called the pleura. The membrane that wraps around your heart is called the pericardium. Okay, the membrane that covers the things in your abdominal cavity is called the peritoneum. Okay, so that's important. You're going to need to know that if you're going into any medical field. Okay, have you ever heard of pleurisy? When someone has, they have a hard time breathing, their lungs hurt. Pleurisy is an inflammation of the membranes around the lungs. Okay, so they can feel their lungs rubbing in their chest. Okay. All right, now the membranes that line the cavities. What do we need to know about them? Okay, so we have three different groups of membranes, and then we have the meninges in here too. Okay, so mucous membranes usually have fluid in them that's sticky. Okay, so mucous membranes line openings. Okay, so they line your inside of your digestive tract, like if you think about coming in your mouth, coming in the urinary tract, coming in the reproductive system. Okay, those are mucous membranes. They're usually sticky. Serous membranes, okay, they line the lungs, the heart, the abdominal cavities. What they do is they secrete a fluid that's called serous fluid. Serous fluid kind of acts as a lubricant, and it's a lubricant that's going to keep, it reduces the friction in the body cavities. So serous membranes produce serous fluid. Okay, and it's real thin and watery, and it reduces friction. So you can't feel your lungs. Normally, you don't feel your lungs rubbing in your chest, or you don't feel your heart beating, or if your stuff moves in your stomach, you don't feel it. So that's what serous membranes are. Okay, synovial membranes are found in movable joints. Okay, we'll talk about them more. They have fluid in them that acts as a lubricant. And then the last membrane that we have in here is meninges. Meninges are coverings around your brain and your spinal cord, and they're protection. If you ever heard of meningitis, meningitis is an inflammation of the meninges. Okay, it can be caused, there's viral meningitis and there's bacterial meningitis. Okay, now we have to talk about homeostasis. Okay, so all throughout all the chapters in our book, we're going to be talking about homeostasis. Okay, so the idea of homeostasis is that no matter what's going on outside of our body, we want the internal environment to stay constant. Okay, so if it's 105 degrees outside, we want your body to say 98.6 degrees. If it's 32 degrees outside, we want your body to say 98.6 degrees. So we want to keep your body's internal conditions constant. Okay, the two big systems that take care of that are the nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay, if we get out of homeostasis, anytime we get out of homeostasis, we get sick. Okay, because we're not functioning the way we're supposed to. Okay, if the sickness isn't corrected and we keep getting more and more out of homeostasis, we can die. Okay, so this is just a chart from your book that just explains how all the different systems help to regulate homeostasis. We're going to go over all of those more in depth when we get to that chapter in the book. So I just want you to kind of read over this and get an idea of how it works. Okay, now, the way we maintain homeostasis, there's two different ways. One is called negative feedback and the other one's called positive feedback. Most of the systems in our body function with negative feedback. So negative feedback is really, really important. Positive feedback is equally as important, it just doesn't happen as often. Okay, so the way negative feedback works, okay, so it's the main mechanism all of our body systems use for homeostasis. Okay, so if I ask you, how do we maintain homeostasis, you're probably going to say negative feedback. Okay, the way that this works is the idea that we have a sensor and we have a control center. Okay, so if we go through this cycle here, here's what happens. Okay, so the sensor is what's going to pick up the information and it sends the data to the control center. Okay, and the control center kind of decides, what do I need to do? Okay, what's the next step? So it tells your body to respond, and your body responds, and hopefully you go back into homeostasis. Okay, and it can work either way. Okay, I know that probably didn't make any sense, so we're going to go over an example. Okay, so if we look at body temperature, okay, so here we are when the seesaw is straight, okay, we're in homeostasis. Okay, so let's say, okay, there is a stimulus. Okay, we're above normal. Our body temperature is too high. So our body detects that it's too hot. Okay, so here we go. The information is going to get sent to our brain. Okay, the brain's going to say, uh-oh, that's not where we're supposed to be. So the brain decides, okay, I have to figure out a way to bring our body temperature back down, because if I get too hot, my proteins and enzymes aren't going to work and I'm going to die. Okay, so the brain, what it does is it tells the blood vessels to dilate, sweat glands to start secrete, and that's going to cool us down. Okay, and that brings our body temperature back to normal. Okay, now it can go the other way. Okay, so if our body temperature is below normal, okay, so we're cold, goes to your brain, we should be at 98.6. Your brain's going to say, well, how am I going to respond? Okay, blood vessels constrict, which means they get smaller. We don't sweat. We start to shiver to generate heat. Okay, and then hopefully we get back to normal. Okay, so negative feedback just means where it's a cycle. We go and we're going to, if something gets out of balance, we're going to come back until it's in balance. Okay, pretty much everything in your body is regulated this way. It works like a thermostat in your house. Okay, it's exactly the same way, it's just in your body. And there's a picture of that in figure 4.16. Okay, now positive feedback is totally different. Okay, so positive feedback is whenever something happens, instead of bringing it back to normal, it just keeps going, keeps happening. Okay, so if you start down here, it'll just keep going until you get the final product. Okay, there's example of positive feedback is labor. Okay, so what happens during labor is we secrete this hormone called, well, the uterus starts to contract. When the uterus contracts, we secrete this hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin causes your uterus to contract more. And the cycle just keeps going on and on and on until, ta-da, you get a baby. Okay, and there's animation too. Positive feedback can sometimes be bad. Okay, so when a fever gets too high, that can go into a positive feedback cycle. Okay, now here's just a little slide of what to study. I'm going to make you guys a study guide for the test.